Welcome back to Just in Perspective podcast. It's your host, Mosh Rahman. Had a phenomenal weekend here, beautiful sunny weekend in Dallas, and unusually warm for November in the upper 80s. And so today, reacting to another clip. As many of you all are aware of, I'm sure, New York City had one of the most memorable mayoral elections to date recently. And with the new mayor, Zohran Mamdani, with some very interesting and some would say radical approach to politics and New York City. So, going to be reacting to uh, Iced Coffee Clips channel, Iced Coffee Hour, I should say. Great channel, amazing in finance. Check them out if you haven't already, and I'll be reacting to probably more of their stuff. But absolutely love their channel for all things finance. So let's get into it.
How do you think Zohran Mamdani's policies are going to affect prices in New York?
It remains to be seen. Listen, worst case scenario is New York City goes on a hold. COVID was 6 years ago,
Wow.
right? Like it was a long time ago now, even though it doesn't feel that way. And so New York City could go on pause,
For real.
right? Which just means that not a whole lot changes. Prices don't go up, prices don't really go down. There are always panic sellers. Like there's during tariffs, when Trump announced tariffs for the first time earlier this year, the stock.
That's a word that most of us have never heard or said nearly as much before this year. I love how random things appear in your life and suddenly it takes over, like tariff. I don't think I've ever used the word tariff once before this year. Now, I'm not a like economic expert in terms of the impact of tariffs in the global economy, but let's see them break them down.
Market fell, right? It was a disaster. That whole weekend, he's playing golf. Everyone's panicking. We had sellers agree to deals in New York City that were just purely based on panic.
Yeah.
10% lower than what they could have sold for 22 days later.
Oof.
Wow.
But sellers just panic, right? Like fear fuels markets.
It's so true. Many people make emotional decisions when it comes to markets, when it comes to stocks or crypto or real estate. For sure, a lot of the market is simply emotional reactions. But in my understanding, emotional reactions is not what the experienced or successful investors do. They make rational, logical choices and decisions. But yeah, a lot of the market is reactionary, and so that's just the world we live in.
So if you just stay calm and you just breathe, New York City has gotten through
Amen.
terrorist attacks, global recessions, global pandemics, climate change, or this, that, the other. Way worse.
Remember 9/11, the single biggest event of our lifetimes, especially if you're over the age of 30, for sure. But yeah, New York City has been through like some of the worst things you can imagine. So this is not gonna be the end or anything. Like no one should be like panicking in terms of that. But it's just gonna be an interesting. This is a democratic socialist that wants to like implement concepts of socialism and someone dare say communism into the biggest financial city of the Western society, if you will. So the reparations, not reparations, repercussions of that is what is the interesting part of this. So
Than a 33-year-old TikTok mayor. So like the worst that can happen is it slows down. I think what probably happens is you have a big pause on development, which means that anything under construction now, anything new, anything luxury today just gets more valuable because it goes right back to supply and demand.
that's good.
What draws prices down, which is what he should do, is incentivize building, rezoning, create more housing, make a ton of it more affordable.
Yeah.
The more housing you have coming to the market, the more pressure you're going to have on pricing. And
It is for sure one of the most expensive cities in the world to live in, and I don't know how people can afford to live there if you're making less than six figures minimum. I honestly don't. Like you're barely living in anything because if I remember correctly, the average rent prices are around 4K a month, and it's like a really small apartment, bro. Like my room is bigger than some of these apartments. I'm not even kidding. And many rooms in many homes in Texas are bigger than the entire apartment complex. So there's no way I could live in that tiny apartment for that expensive price. I don't see the value of it. But then again, I'm not a New York City guy, so in terms of living there, but it's true. I totally understand, and I do agree that because of the cost of living is so high, especially for your average citizen, tax-paying citizen that probably is not making six figures. Um, it would be great if you could implement policies or something to reduce the cost of living. However, in economics and economy, like it's just not that simple. The law, that's why it's a free market, and if the law goes too far, right, making trying to take over business, that's where you go get into trouble with what we see in China and communism and whatever, state owned, which is what they're trying to implement, like state owned businesses and so forth. So they dictate prices, they dictate markets. So there's not necessarily free market anymore. And yeah, um, it is, that's a different conversation, but life is hierarchical. Yeah. And expensive things is not meant to be affordable for everyone. It's not. And the same with everyone can't be a brain surgeon. You know what I'm saying? Everyone can't be a pilot or a air traffic controller or whatever. There, difficult things are difficult for a reason, so that whoever gains them or is able to acquire, they had to go through a series of difficult things to acquire them. So it's we don't live in a world where it literally is just free and open for all human beings. I understand the appeal of that, and trust me, I was born in third world country. I know poverty. I understand one of the poorest nations on earth, and I see poverty all the time. And I would love to eradicate poverty. I'm going down a rabbit hole, but I would love to eradicate poverty, but it's just not a simple answer, and it's so much at stake. But yeah, I am interested to see this play out in a realistic sense in the city of New York. I'm just curious, like how it's going to affect businesses. I understand he wants to tax billionaires, which I get it. And we used to live in America where ultra wealthy got taxed at a higher rate, and it didn't do a lot of damage to the middle class like it does today. But unfortunately, the repercussions is a lot of high net worth individuals, multimillionaires and such, are now just leaving. Like they have the ability to move, so why would they stay there if you're gonna tax them more or whatever, right? So this, unfortunately, middle class citizens are gonna feel the brunt of that again.
And then the more you're going to have to incentivize everybody else to lower prices, do this, do that. Like Giuliani post 9/11 created a 421A and 421G tax abatement in New York City.
Oh.
And everyone was up in arms. And all it did is said, if you are willing to develop real estate in New York City so that people will live here and feel safe, you can defer all real estate taxes for 10 to 25 years, depending on the asset, right? Depending on if you're going to build some public infrastructure, if it's a conversion building, this, that, the other. And it boomed New York because there was incentive to come back. It created new housing. New York City bounced back post the greatest terrorist attack on U.S. soil in history, right?
Yeah.
So if he creates
that day can never be forgotten from anyone who was alive and young enough to remember. 7th grade, I talk about it in another episode. And yeah, 9/11, probably the single biggest impactful day. If you're a millennial like me, if you're in your 30s and up, like we know our generation went through a lot of shit because that was at like early teenage years. It was just not, it just happened out of the blue, childhood, and all of a sudden biggest terrorist attack in history. Like holy shit! And then a few years later, the housing crisis, right? And then one after another. So our it's kind of like since the post World War II era generation, in the glory days and so forth, there's always been something. And without being directly involved in warfare, like legitimate warfare, millennials have experienced like as much trauma as you can as a generation, and 9/11 being probably the single biggest one. So, yep. that's a sad day, and can never forget. 13 years old, 7th grade, heard about it first thing in the morning, and then all day it was about that on the in every class, and yeah. So this world is a post 9/11 world. It impacted the whole world. So
It's incentives instead of taking away the opportunity to build. I think pricing could go through the roof. But if he just holds firm and pushes on a lot of his other policies, then New York City will probably just stay on pause for a second. Great real estate will still sell. Other real estate will just sit tight, and everyone will just wait out what happens.
I pray that the real estate market improves for most people. I know it's rough. I thank the Lord above that I've been blessed with an opportunity to own and purchase a land myself. I do not take that for granted. I'm very grateful, and I'm aware that most of my generation is struggling with this, and buyers in general. I just saw the average home buyer, first time average home buyer, is the oldest it's ever been in recorded history. It's in the late 40s now for your first time home buyer. 30 years ago, 1990, it was in your 20s. It's a completely different world. Previous generations cannot relate to it. They did not grow up in the same world. This world is completely different, and it just can't follow the same rules as the previous world that came before us. Now with internet, technology, social media, AI, all that stuff, it's just a completely different world. So anyway, I digress, but yeah, this is going to be a really interesting economic economic experiment here in New York City. I'm by far no means a expert in economy or geopolitics or none of that stuff, but having a base understanding of like socialism and communism and capitalism, I'm just really curious because historically speaking, it just hasn't worked. As a concept, ideas and communism and socialism kind of fall flat on its head, from my understanding. But let's see what they say.
Does that also apply to freeze the rent?
Yeah, he's talking about rent freeze and rent stabilized and rent controlled apartments. I mean, all that does, and I get it. Like, I understand why he won. I totally understand.
Yeah.
It is unbelievably unaffordable. Not just for the home. Like, I mean, there are 350,000 people in New York City that are homeless. Like, I wear one of these bracelets on my wrist. Every dollar we sell from this one goes to the Coalition for the Homeless in New York City. And I push that as much as possible. Rent is high.
Yeah.
Food is too high. Regular necessities are all too high.
Yep.
Healthcare is too high, even with Obamacare or how you use it, right? So I get it. Like, if you're angry and someone comes out and says, I know why you're angry and I'm going to fix it, that guy, you vote for that guy. Whether you know how he's going to do that or not, it doesn't matter. It's just someone who's aligning with your anger. Like, I totally get it. Mirroring anger is probably the greatest way to the office ever. We saw Trump do it on the same side.
True.
Mamdani is the left's version of Trump, right? It took the hard left position, and a lot of people said, yeah, but if you...
That is a bold statement, and I have to agree. Yeah, he is the left's version of Trump, which to some will say is sacrilege or extremely disrespectful. But yeah, people, if the past few elections has taught us anything, when people are motivated and they're sick of whatever reality they're in currently, and then someone comes up who says, I have the answer and we have to make radical changes and the system is against you and I'm here to solve your problems or whatever, he's going to win. He or she's going to win most of the voters. You know what I'm saying? Especially if they're united on that front. People are definitely united on tax-paying citizens, on the cost of living, on the economic crisis, on education, inflation, jobs. I mean, all that. A lot of the middle class, if not most, are definitely united on that front, and especially in a microcosm of New York City. So yeah, of course, you got some guy, a radical young man who has like a very radical new, shifting idea and political philosophy. So he's definitely gonna garner support of the younger generation for sure, and not as so much the older generation from the breakdown I saw, but for sure the younger voters. And like he said, cost of everything is expensive. Rent's high, food's high, grocery bill is high. Your stupid taxes is high. You know what I'm saying? The stupid fees you pay for the garbage can is high. Like, yes, it is. But like at the same time, I think people have they have the choice to live there or not, and unless you're like homeless, I'm not saying by that means, but if you have the means to actually relocate or try again or move to a different location, then technically you have the choice to not live somewhere if you have the means, right? I understand if you don't have the means, yes, homeless, obviously I see them here in my city, and I do my best to give back as much as I can. So yeah, not everyone has the means. It's true. And life is tough. It's not fair for everyone. It's not fair for most. But if you have the means to change your location, scenery, friendship, people, jobs, whatever, then by definition you have the choice. And so you're choosing not to make the choice if you actually have the means to. So
talk to people right now as to, great, awesome. How is this going to happen? No one has any idea, and nor do they really, really care. But I think if he focuses on creating instead of taking, we could have a great city. And I hope he does, man. Like, there's only one New York.
Yeah. How would a rent freeze in New York City affect the prices?
I don't know, because I don't think it's possible. So like I don't think there's a real case study in the U.S. anyway, definitely in New York. What a rent freeze will do is disincentivize anyone who actually owns said apartments to fix them. And so you go back to like New York City of the 60s and 70s, where you have these derelict buildings with apartments that are falling apart, hallways that are crap, light bulbs that are out, trash that's not picked up.
Hell no.
And that then affects the sidewalk, which then affects the next building, that then affects the next building. And then developers come and say, well, I can't build on this block. These buildings are all disaster. That then affects the next building. And then these buildings go underwater because the rents are frozen, but you're not freezing interest rates.
Nope.
You freeze rent, that's fine, but you're not freezing the rates.
Exactly.
You're not freezing markets. You're not freezing time.
Whole different story if you freeze the rates or the markets. I don't know if they have that kind of a power. I don't believe so. You can't just shut down the world. You know what I'm saying? You just can't shut down. Money goes and goes. It just doesn't stop. But yeah, I understand the idea. If you're like someone struggling to make ends meet and to pay bills and to hold jobs and whatever, and you live in New York City, the most expensive city, and your rent keeps going up, yeah, rent freeze sounds amazing. It sounds great, and we don't want to see the rents keep going up. Unfortunately, economically speaking, it just doesn't work out for if you include maintenance, if you, like you said, repairs, right? That's why rental properties, beyond profit, the increases have to go towards rising costs of everything. Electricity costs, energy costs, fixing shits, you know what I'm saying? So when I used to have an apartment, if something broke or something's not working, I have to call and they have to put in a service ticket and they have to come fix it. But I pay X amount of money per month, and a lot of that is covered in that payment. You know what I'm saying? So, on the surface, it sounds good, rent freeze, but it just doesn't. I don't like he's saying right now. It doesn't work across the board, overall perspective. You know.
And so, who's going to fix all these apartments with what money? Like with what profit? You're just not going to do it, and that's what happens.
You know what I never understood is why rent control still applies to people who make several $100,000 a year. I thought it would be a great principle, at least better than the current system, is if you're making above a certain amount, you're not rent controlled.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, you have people that are making $200,000 a year that just happen to be in a rent controlled spot because they happened to sign a lease in 2010.
Yeah. It's hard to get tenants out of apartments who are making more money. It does happen. Rent control was not set up for people who can afford free market apartments.
True.
It is what it is. You know?
How would you?
The answer to every unanswerable question, it is what it is. It will forever be. Like, I know people get annoyed by that, but when you just don't have an answer, that's pretty much the only answer.
You change the housing market if you were mayor?
The number one problem is lack of affordable inventory. That is it. So your number one goal should be to incentivize building. You do that through rezoning and developer build and tax credits. It's not bad, it's good. And you also look at, in New York City, the number of New York State and New York City owned buildings.
Yeah.
One of the things that Trump talked about this last time was the amount of federally owned land in the United States. And nothing's being done with it. So what could you do with that to create incentives to get builders to come and build 10,000 houses? But you have to do a school and a grocery store and free fare buses. Sure, why not? To have the right to go build 10,000 houses? Well, sure, right?
Yeah.
You want to create incentive, but it's not just the housing. Who's going to live in these houses? So then you have to follow some of the Bloomberg policies where he said, we are going to create incentives for businesses to come here to create jobs.
That's a good one.
Right? We're not going to disincentivize Amazon to bring 10,000 W-2 workers here, which is exactly what New York City did, and said, hey, you can afford to pay taxes. And they said, we're going to pay taxes. We're going to bring 10,000 jobs here.
Yeah.
And then he went to another state, right? You would create incentives for companies to come from all over the country to say New York City is the absolute greatest place to innovate. You create innovation awards.
This dude's arm candy is crazy. Like what he's got all over in his arms and rings. I'm like, damn, that looks pretty cool. But maybe it's a bit loud, but who cares? But what he's saying is of substance, of course. Yes, Amazon, world's biggest delivery company, e-commerce. You're going to see, if you live anywhere remotely big, you're going to see an Amazon truck almost every day of the week now. Yeah, I heard they were going to relocate to Jersey or whatever, but like you mentioned, if they're going to increase the taxes, I'm not a tax expert, but I understand that the tax code permits corporations to avoid paying a lot of taxes as long as they reinvest the profits back into their company, which is exactly what Amazon does. Not an expert. Check out Dave Ramsey and others for that. But yeah, you can't force someone a business or whatever to make your city the HQ, make your city the headquarters, especially if you're going to tax them the hell out of them when they have alternatives where they can save that alternative tax money. Yes, are they worth billions of dollars and is it really a big a deal? No, but can they do that? Yeah. The one with the gold makes the rules.
You want New York City to be on a pedestal where people say, I couldn't start my career anywhere else because all the major employers are actually in New York City. They're incentivized to be there. They have tax credits because they created 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100,000 new jobs every single year, right? There's 125,000 babies born in New York City every single year. We should be creating through government incentives that many new jobs on top of what the private markets are already creating. Why would you not do that? Yeah. Why is creating opportunity seen as such a bad thing? Who else is going to pay for everything? 50% of the tax revenue in New York City is paid for by 1% of the taxpayer.
Damn, when you break it down like that, estimated share of NYC income paid by top 1%. Top 1% AGI pays 40% currently. Bottom 99% pays 60%. That's a fucking huge percentage of the pie. The top 1% pays 40% of the taxes. Wow. Yeah. But Mamdani, they 61% to 39%. But it's not going to be like that because I don't foresee the right pie chart going that way because a lot of the 1% high net worth people, individuals, businesses, whatever, they're just gonna figure out how to get out of there and avoid paying those taxes because I would if I was them too. So
what do you do if that 1% goes to another state? Every state is its own company, right? New York is a company with a CEO, a COO, a board, right? California, Nevada, it's its own company. All of your residents are employees.
Damn.
That's what they are. And you have to incentivize your C-suite the same way you have to incentivize your interns to want to be there. You should all be focused on making the greatest Yelp scores, right? Glassdoor reviews should be the absolute best, but they don't do that, right? Where are the bloated budgets? Where can you cut it down, create inefficiencies, and just create incentive to build? That will lower prices. That'll create more housing. And if you combine that with more jobs, you would have not just the healthiest housing market, but you'd have one of the healthiest markets in the US.
If you've ever been denied a car loan, credit card, or even an apartment because of what's on your credit report, you are not alone. Most people don't.
I think that's the end of this clip here. Okay. Yeah. So amazing clip, and this is by Iced Coffe Hour. Okay, and this is just their clip channel. So yeah. So it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be, like I said, economic experiment. I don't want to get too much into the politics there and the weeds and the identity politics BS. Yes, he's Muslim, I'm Muslim, etc. He's in his 30s, I'm in my 30s. But from all I'm saying is, from what I understand, from the history of socialism and communism in the world of planet Earth, it hasn't been a successful experiment, really, and hasn't held up to its own standards. So we're going to see how that holds up. But yeah, check out Iced Coffe Hour. I keep having a hard time saying it. Iced Coffe Hour, amazing podcast, one of the best in finance in the world. I love the hosts. They're just very sharp individuals and very deep thinkers, and amazing, insane amount of value with their economic information. And I'll post a comment. I'll post a link below. If you like this episode, please hit the like button and subscribe for more. What do you think about Zohran Mamdani and New York City and socialism and the modern day economy? Comment below. Let me know. I mean, I'm sure it's difficult for you and for many. But yeah, just comment below your thoughts on Mamdani in New York and what that transpires to. If you like this episode, again, please hit the like button and subscribe for more. And with that, this is Mosh. Remember, just some perspective.